What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap, and today we are going to take a look at the future of Marvel Snap, taking a look at cards that will release in 2026, starting with the January Season Pass, and all of these data mines are courtesy of Snap Fan and are subject to change. But I do think that this card is the Season Pass here to start off with because it looks absolutely busted. This is Shou-Lao the Undying, a 5/10 with on reveal, give the last character you played +2 power for each turn you played 2 or more cards. And this thing has a lot of base power to begin with. A 5/10 is no slouch. I do think from a flavor perspective though, it makes sense to keep this card at 10 power. That way Shang-Chi can defeat it. This is sort of a Shang-Chi themed season. Spoiler alert, we are getting a new Shang-Chi. And it also kind of needs to have 5 cost. That way you can play it alongside a 1 cost card on the final turn of the game. So those stats do kind of feel important to both the flavor and the power of the card, but it is very, very powerful with its ability on top of that. I think often this is going to be a 5/18 and for not that much work even. So in order to play 2 cards in a turn, you probably aren't making use of that ability on turn 1, unless you have like a Wasp or a Yellow Jacket, which Yellow Jacket has seen some play, Wasp has seen some play. It's not unreasonable, but it's probably not worth the squeeze just for Shou-Lao. One thing that I do also want to note, based off my interpretation of what I'm reading here, this card will work more like Null than it does High Evolutionary Hulk or Red Hulk, which both have to be in your hand, or Galactus First Steps. All 3 of those cards have to be in your hand in order to start receiving their bonuses and building up to more power, but it looks like Shou-Lao will just be able to be in your deck, and then if you draw it on the final turn of the game, you will be able to play it with all of the accrued bonuses that you've earned throughout the game. Now, in order to accrue said bonuses, I think you're mostly going to be looking at playing multiple cards on turns 3 through 6, potentially 3 through 7 if you want to add a Limbo into the game. Your mileage may vary, but I think that there are a lot of ways to just easily make sure that you are playing multiple cards in a turn. The first one that came to mind was Kitty Pryde, because then you have just a 1 cost card that you can play every turn alongside a slightly undercurved card, and then basically Kitty Pryde is like a +3 every time you play it, and potentially more if you have other synergies with it. Kitty Pryde could give you additional incentive to try to fill your locations, which could lean you towards playing Wasp, though I don't think that you will quite get exactly there. I think the main card that this will get played with, though, basically for free, is Merlin. You just play Merlin on turn 2, and then every turn after that, you cast one of Merlin's spells and play another card from your hand, and that's really, really fantastic. I should also note that it gives the last character you played +2 power, which means playing some Merlin skills won't interrupt what this is buffing. And you could theoretically on turn 5 play a 4 cost card and then polymorph it with a Merlin skill, and then on turn 6 play another Merlin skill somewhere else plus Shou-Lao, and your polymorphed 4 cost, now 5 cost card will receive the big bonus from Shou-Lao. So, and maybe it could even polymorph into a Shou-Lao. That would be obviously quite powerful. And yeah, this thing just seems really, really good regardless. So Shang-Chi's gonna have to put in some work in order to vanquish this dragon. Next up, we're going to look at 2 Start of Season Series 5 cards. I don't actually know which of these 2 will be the Super Premium Season Pass card and which one will only be available in Snap Packs, but one of these 2 dragons is Lockheed, which is a 2/1 with End of Turn. If you played a 1-cost card this turn, afflict an enemy card here with -2 power. There's a few pretty powerful things going on with Lockheed. Similarly, if we want to think about how many times we can use this ability, it seems fairly easy to activate Lockheed on turns 3 through 6 if we are playing Merlin spells or Kitty Pride, and you can see where this goes pretty well alongside a Shou-Lao. Now, that's going to mean that Lockheed is effectively a 2/9 for you. Pretty good stats, I think. And there's obviously some additional synergies that Lockheed can play into, namely that it is an additional card that can work with Invisible Woman First Steps. I don't think that we have had any new end of turn cards release that are good with Invisible Woman First Steps since the release of Invisible Woman First Steps. So this is just another card that you can add into the deck, and I do think it's possibly a card that the deck wants. It's a little bit tricky to fit it in on the curve. However, if you can play it alongside a Sunspot on the final turn of the game and then activate a bunch of Invisible Women and Jocastas, that seems good. You could also potentially, then you're like playing 2 cards for your Thena. So Thena kind of wants you to play some 1-cost cards. I think that this might go better in a shell that is also like sometimes playing Fantasticar, but like the Hydra Bob and the Black Cat, which are just good 1-cost end of turn cards that mostly synergize with the Fantasticar, but also now can synergize with Lockheed. So I do think that this card can immediately find some homes, which is pretty good. And that's to say nothing of just like putting it in a good stuff deck and just having it be a 2/9. That's not really where we are right now in Marvel Snap, where people are just playing generic 2/9s, but a 2/9 is that's pretty good. So I think it certainly could see some play. Obviously, Shang-Chi is going to, I'm sorry, not Shang-Chi, Luke Cage is going to shut it down. Shang-Chi will not be able to touch this dragon, but Luke Cage could shut it down. If it doesn't, though, this is a good way to mess with a Cerebro deck, being able to do some affliction that doesn't require an on reveal, so it's going to get through Cosmo, though there's a little bit of that right now with Spider-Punk as well. But I still think Lockheed seems like a pretty reasonable card. Now, I'm not sure if Lockheed or Dragon of the Moon will be our super premium season pass card for the season, but whichever one isn't will be the one that releases into Snap Packs. And Dragon of the Moon is a 3/2 with, on reveal, steal 1 power from even-costed cards in all hands, both your own and your opponent. I don't think that stealing power from your own cards is going to be super fruitful. However, it does have some synergy with if you steal power from your own cards, you're pumping up your Ajax, and you could always remove that buff, or that debuff rather, with a Luke Cage later on. One other thing that I think could be really interesting with Dragon of the Moon is just not playing any even costed cards at all, which sounds like a tricky hoop to jump through, but there actually is a deck that has done that before, and I really like thematically the fact that this is the Dragon of the Moon caring about kind of like not playing even costed cards when Moon Knight is a similar 3-cost on reveal card with a mechanic that kind of ties in with it. And that was played recently, or actually not recently, it was played a little bit ago in a deck that just had 1s, 3s, and 5s. And that way, whenever you played Moon Knight, you would never discard anything. However, it did play one other card that was even. You could play just Proxima Midnight or just Swarm, and then you would always discard that beneficial discard card with your Moon Knight. But most of the time you were just discarding nothing and making your opponent discard a card, which is pretty cool and an interesting way to build a deck. Also, Proxima Midnight does kind of fit the theme because at midnight you can see the moon. And I really like this angle of just like, okay, all cards that reference the moon, and I will say this is going to break before the end of the video because I've looked ahead at the cards. This is actually my second time filming this. If you saw my post, I am re-recording this, so that's why I already have some thoughts on all of the cards, but I still wanted to put out this video because I do think that there are some really interesting cards coming out this season. And Dragon of the Moon, I just really appreciated the moon tie-in with Moon Knight and being able to play it in a deck of all odd cost cards. The fact that you're stealing power is cool. If you steal power from like 2 of your opponent's cards, then this is a 3/6. If you steal power from 3 of your opponent's cards, then this is like somewhere between a 3/6 and a 3/8, depending on how many of those cards your opponent actually winds up playing, right? Because if they don't play the afflicted card, then it's like you never stole power from it. So it's like a 3/4 to a 3/6 or a 3/5 to a 3/8, somewhere in there. It doesn't really seem that good, to be honest, so I think that Dragon of the Moon is going to need a little bit more help, and honestly, that probably solidifies the fact that this is the card that you can open up in snap packs, and that Lockheed is the card available from the Super Premium Season Pass card. We also have releasing on the first day of the season 1 Series 4 card, and that is going to be another 1-cost skill. We've been getting a few of these recently, and releasing in January, we will have Majestic Wingbeat, which is a 1-cost skill. So yeah, again, pretty cheap. I just said that. This has on reveal, give the leftmost card in your hand +2 power. If it's 5 cost or higher, -1 cost as well. And that is notably always going to hit your champion in the Grand Arena. Not bad. It is also always going to hit Agatha. The leftmost card in your hand is that Agatha slot. Now, I don't think that that's enough to put this in an Agatha deck specifically, because that would still mean that turn 2 and 4 Agatha is going to wind up controlling, which is probably just too much. And then turn 5, you do get control over where you're playing your 14 power Agatha. It could be a reasonable backup, but I think for the most part, it's not something that you are going to want to mess around with. I was just thinking, okay, as a 1-cost card, would you ever play this with like Joaquin Torres and play it on a 6-cost card? It's a little bit tricky to kind of make the puzzle for this work, but it's not that tough, because if you don't have a 5-cost or higher card in your hand, then you can simply play those cards out, and then you are able to hit the expensive cards that are in your hand. And you know what? Something like this is not crazy for Destroy to play, because there's 2 really good hits, and you might need more than 2 really good hits, but giving Deadpool +2 power is something that the deck has asked for before, especially for only 1 energy. Another thing that this could do is potentially give a discount to your Null, which allows you another line towards playing Null plus Deadpool on the final turn of the game. Now, I don't think that that's good enough, but it's interesting, and you could consider it. I don't think that Majestic Wingbeat is going to make it into the Destroy decks right now, just because Destroy's slots seem so congested. But speaking of congested, like when you draw a bunch of cards with Moira, being able to just like dump Majestic Wingbeat is a good thing, because sometimes that deck just doesn't get to draw cards because it has too many cards in its hand. And Victoria hand decks sometimes come up with that problem. I think the Victoria hand is probably going to look for like Deafening Chord or something instead of this, just because you're getting a lot more value out of that. Yeah, to be totally honest. And yeah, Viggy hand really doesn't want anything to do with this, but just trying to think of some other scenarios. I think that this one will probably stay on the bench or stay in your snap packs. I don't think that that's really one that you want to be opening. Next up, we have another Series 5 card, and this is Lin Lie Iron Fist, a new version of Iron Fist, which adds it's a 2/2 with on reveal, add the Sword of Fuzi to another location. The Sword of Fuzi is a 2/2 with ongoing. If Lin Lie Iron Fist is here, he has +7 power. This does not seem that good. It's a 2/2 with a small benefit for moving once, making it actually, it's a 2/4 with a small benefit for moving once. It gets +7 power. The fact that it's a 2/4, okay, yeah, that's fine. And it also generates a card with ongoing. It also generates a card, so it is going to make your Mockingbird cheaper. One thing that I'm not sure how relevant this could ever hope to be, but Spider-Man Noir has just released, and there's basically 2 play lines that you're looking to hit with Spider-Man Noir. It's Squirrel Girl into 2/3, Squirrel Girl giving you 3 or 2 extra power on the board, and then giving you a total of 8 when you flip over that Spider-Man Noir on turn 4. The other line that you are looking for is any other 1-cost card plus Mr. Sinister, followed by a 3. And this is like another version of Mr. Sinister because it's a 2-cost card that makes another 2-cost card, which does separate it from something like Zombie Mr. Fantastic, which is a 2-cost that makes a 0, therefore it's not going to really contribute anything extra to Spider-Man Noir. If there is a universe where Spider-Man Noir could come to fruition, it doesn't seem like it's as good of a payoff nearly as Wiccan, for instance. But if that is something that you are looking to do, then Lin Lie and the Sword of Fuzi is another card that can help you reach that payoff. I think that it's probably more relevant in something like, well, you think about something like Thanos with Mockingbird and Spectrum. This is an ongoing card. It is also, okay, this is something. So one thing that I think is super easy to miss when doing this Datamined content is the cards that are going to come out in the interim. Like, I'm comparing all of these cards and how they'll work with each other a little bit, though that can be easy to forget too. I'm mostly comparing them to cards that currently exist in Marvel Snap because we know those are like givens, right? But it's easy to forget about something like Aurora, which I do think is going to be an all-star card, and this can pump up your on-reveal cards and your ongoing cards, your activate and your end of turn. A card that gets to count for both of those things in 2 different locations could be reasonable, especially since I do think like an Aurora Thanos sort of hybrid shell does seem reasonable to me. Playing another card that does sort of work in that archetype makes some sense, and the main benefit that you're getting from this is the fact that it's 2 things. One of them gets pumped up by Spectrum or Aurora, and the discount on Mockingbird, as well as potentially food for Strange Supreme, though that's not really what you're looking for in the Aurora decks specifically, right? Those won't be Strange Supreme decks. I do think that Thanos is not really a deck with the current iteration of the stones that wants to be playing a move card, because you're already so constricted on where you can place your cards when you've got all of those stones and you have to manage with different locations and things. Otherwise, Lin Lie, I mean, we've kind of jumped ahead to like the next level strategies for Lin Lie, but like on its surface value, it's kind of a new take on Crystal, right? It's a 2-cost card that has a benefit from moving, but unlike Crystal, you really only get that benefit from moving it the first time. It's going to get +7 power for moving into the same location as its sword, but otherwise, it's not really going to get any benefit from just itself, maybe from the other cards in your deck or whatever. So compared to Crystal, Crystal is a 2/2 and gets up to a 2/10 if you move it into a full location. This is a 2/4 that gets up to a 2/11, so like just from one move and from 0 moves, it is beating Crystal. Crystal, obviously, like you're playing a move deck, you want to play into those synergies, you're going to play cards that can move multiple times, but it's not terrible just like on that surface. And it is interesting to have cards that like start bigger but don't grow as much. And that's basically what this is. This starts twice as big as Crystal. The first time it moves, it's probably bigger than, definitely bigger than Crystal. And then the third time that it moves, it's irrelevant. So it's interesting to just kind of like have access to those tools. Another thing I will say is just like a move deck in general doesn't really want to be making token cards, because then it's just hard to manage all of your space. Like often move decks are, you have like one, I mean, that's not true. You can play move and have like 4 open spaces on the final turn, but it just kind of depends on which version of move you're playing, and your board space is a resource that you do have to consider. Next, we are going to consider Fing, Fang, Foom, which is a 7/12. So already reasonably exciting. With an on reveal, gain the power of front row enemy cards here. Very interesting. Okay, I don't even really remember reading Fing, Fang, Foom in my first go through of all of these cards, and I think that that's partially really just because the whole puzzle here with 7-cost cards is trying to figure out how you're getting that 7, more so than what you're doing once you get that 7. And they've started to add a few more actual 7-cost cards to the game recently, which is interesting. For a while, we only had, well, I don't even know if we had any for a while. We just had Death, right? Which is an 8-cost card. And then we got Scar, which gives itself a discount. We got Arishem, which gives you the energy to play Arishem. And then we did start to get a few more, right? We got Dormammu, we got Zombie Galacti. And I know we got one in December. If we go back to this, where is it? Yeah, we're getting Weapon H in December, which I do think is a cool card. When discarded, put this back with -2 cost. But again, Weapon H gives you the ability to play it. I'm probably forgetting a 7-cost card right now. Forgive me. But that's the main thing that you got to think about when you see a 7-cost card is like, especially if I am forgetting a 7-cost card, how difficult a 7-cost card is to actually play. Zombie Galacti just got a buff in yesterday's OTA, depending on when you're watching this. It got a buff of +1 power. I don't know if that's really going to move the needle. This is like potentially anywhere from a 7. Like it either just wins the location because your opponent doesn't have anything there, right? So then that's totally fine. Or your opponent has some small cards, like their front row cards are more likely to be their tinier cards, right? If they are playing some tinier cards earlier on in the game, or if you play against an opponent that is just playing a few big cards, then Fing Fang Foom can steal all of that power. And that can be like, if you're playing against a War Machine Infinite deck and they just play Infinite in one location, then Fing Fang Foom comes down for 32 points, and that's pretty good, obviously. So I do think that this card will be winning the locations that it comes into, but is that worth it? You have to be winning probably the other 2 locations going into the final turn with reasonable points, and then you use Fing, Fang, Foom to battle back in the location that your opponent has already committed to. So it's going to be better against specific decks rather than others. It could potentially be stealing like a zombie horde's power. That's somewhat reasonable. It could steal power from a man spider or a Black Panther. All of those things are obviously cool. But the real question is, how are you going to get to 7 energy? Are you going to play Limbo and then expose yourself to Merlin? Are you going to play the Majestic Wingbeat and try to give it a discount? I don't think that any of those things are super useful, and I also don't think that this is super synergistic with the Season Pass card. So I think for those reasons, I'm currently out on Fing Fang Foom, but we will be looking at a card in just a moment that also contributes to ramp strategy. So we'll reconsider Fing Fang Foom in just a moment, but first, we've got to take a look at the new Shang-Chi Master of the Rings. This is a 3/4 with a totally new ability. It's not going to be destroying cards with 10 or more power. Instead, it is going to add the 10 rings to your hand at the start of the game. I'm just now noticing the 10 rings plus the 10 power aspect of Shang-Chi. I think that's just a coincidence because Shang-Chi did not release destroying cards with 10 or more power. Now it does, but it also has an on reveal, unlock their potential. So what does Shang-Chi do? We don't know until we take a look at the 10 rings. This is just a 3/4. And I do know what the text of the 10 rings are as well. The 10 rings is a 2/0 with end of turn, give one of your other cards here +1 power. And we'll talk about the upgrade for 10 rings in just a moment, but I want to break down everything that this can do. First off, this starting in your hand actually does have some pretty good implications. This is a guaranteed discount for Mockingbird for sure, and it is also a guaranteed green power buff trigger, however you want to look at it, for Superior Spider-Man, which is where I think this is really going to shine. You can always count on playing the 10 rings on turn 2, then playing Superior Spider-Man into that same location on turn 3, which will then pump up the Superior Spider-Man end of turn, giving you an extra energy for turns 4, 5, and 6. I think that that's quite good. I think that that's quite good because it's really just turning Superior Spider-Man into guaranteed ramp and doesn't really require any other setup other than playing Shang-Chi in your deck. But you don't have to draw it, you don't have to play it to upgrade the rings. If you do, it's still fine, it's whatever. But I think that's the main synergy that people are going to look at for the 10 rings. And otherwise, it's another end of turn card, and it's an end of turn card that you can guarantee on being able to play because it's always in your starting hand. It's discountable. You can give it a discount through Ravonna, which is not irrelevant because Ravonna also gives discounts to Lockheed and Thena. So these things start to add up in terms of just playing a bunch of cards that can all get a discount. It's a 0 power card, so you could pump it up with Bast potentially, and then just get like some more value out of it that way. I'm not sure how it will work. It says unlock their potential. It doesn't say transform the 10 rings. So I think by unlocking the ring's potential, it will still keep any buffs that you've put onto it from like a Bast or something like that you've played on turn 1. This is not a Cerebro 3 card by any means, but you could just still play it in like, there have been decks that play Bast and Thena. They were Agent Venom decks. It's been a bit. But yeah, this could be an Agent Venom card. It can't actually get pumped up by Agent Venom, which is why I didn't want to reference that to start off with. But I do think that the 10 rings could actually be pretty good. Anything that you always have access to is something that you could potentially build around, and we haven't even talked about what's actually going on this card. I do think I mentioned Invisible Woman First Steps, right? Okay, so just vanilla-wise, if you play this on turn 2 into a location with nothing else in it, which you might do a reasonable portion of the time, and I do want to say, it says, game start, the 10 rings starts in your hand. That is actually going to be a real deal breaker, because there's two different potential things going on. It's either game start, add the 10 rings to your hand, giving you a bonus card in your starting hand, or it's the 10 rings start in your hand, taking up a slot from another card that you will then have to draw. If that's the case, which actually reading it now, it feels like that might be the case. It might be that latter one where you are then only getting 2 other cards in your opening hand. In traditional Marvel Snap, believe, you start with 3 cards in your hand. So it would be the 10 rings plus 2 others, and then your draw for turn 1. Or if it is the 10 rings plus 3 others and then your draw for turn 1, I do think it's a lot better, but I'm actually leaning towards that not being the case now. So that's a little bit tricky, but assume that you don't get a buff on turn 1 or turn 2. I think that's fairly reasonable, but then you play a card there on turn 3, Superior Spider-Man perchance. The reason, just quick caveat, the reason that it seems a lot worse if you only get 2 other cards in your hand, like it might still be a reasonable card to build around, but it's just going to be harder to play into specific synergies if you're diluting your deck of being able to draw Invisible Woman First Steps or Superior Spider-Man, because by only drawing 2 cards instead of 3, you will then have 10 cards left in your deck as opposed to 9, which just means you'll have 1 more card undrawn at the end of the game. But if you just play it on turn 2, play something into it on turn 3, have the 10 rings, buff that card every single turn, it is a 2/4. Not terrible. With a buff on turns 3, 4, 5, and 6. Not terrible, a 2/4, right? Obviously not good by itself, and we haven't even looked at unlocking the ring's full potential, which I will discuss now. I think there's no like graphic for it, but I have seen this on SnapFan elsewhere, that the unlocked potential of the 10 rings has 1 additional power, so it's a 2/1 instead of a 2/0, and it says end of turn, give all of your other cards here +1 power. Yeah, so this is also on SnapFan. And yeah, you can see right here, cost 2, power 1. There's no like made up card for it, which makes me think it isn't a transform. It's just like something that happens to the card. It gets this ability instead, which is now give your other cards here +1 power instead of just pumping up 1 card each turn. Now, if you can do that, that's pretty reasonable, probably in some completely different decks. Again, maybe some type of Aurora Thanos deck, or some other deck that is just playing a bunch of cards into a location. You basically get to make a location into a one-sided Mirror Island, which is pretty good. Anything that works with Mirror Island is going to work well with this. Ooh, you know what a good 1-drop to play in this deck would be? Clea. I am a huge Clea enjoyer, so that's a lot of fun. There's some other good ones as well. Any types of tokens that you could run out there, anything that's going to fill the location, like Elsa or Kitty Pryde or Zombie Scarlet Woman. But some big things that also gain some bonuses are going to be mostly Silver Surfer cards are coming to the top of mind. Sebastian Shaw, Human Torch First Steps, Captain Carter. All of those are really good to just play with the original 10 rings and then just keep them there as your only card at that location. So like just play 10 rings into Captain Carter and then don't play anything else in that location for a little bit, so that way Captain Carter gets the buff every single turn. Something like that could be reasonable. Sebastian Shaw, Clea, those things seem like a lot of fun. So yeah, maybe there's something there. I think that Clea does need some additional support, and Yeah, seems like fun to me. Let's move on to the final card for the January season. And then I'm also going to take a look at some even earlier prototypes of cards from the February season. I think that those are even less set in stone, and these probably won't change that much until they are released. But we have Dragon Lord, which I believe will be coming as a result of like the Grand Arena or something in the January season, or Sanctum Showdown, what have you. Dragon Lord is a 5/5, which says on reveal, put a card from your hand here. Fairly straightforward, and potentially a way to get Fing Fang Foom into play. Now, we do have some other effects in the game that do pretty similar stuff, notably putting your cards from hand as opposed to putting your cards in from deck. Does give you a different level of control, because if you're able to dump some of the cards out of your hand, like, you know, playing out your Makaris and your Wasps or just other cheap cards, it does limit what Fing Fang Foom is able to pull. The other cards that cheat out cards from your hand are much more difficult to work than Dragon Lord. We have Red Wing, which requires an additional card to move, and then you're playing all of these move synergy cards in your deck where you want to cheat out big things, and the other one is Isan. If there's others other than those two, I can't think of them off the top of my head, just Isan and Red Wing. Isan being a lot more difficult with a slightly bigger payoff. You get to do it at the end of every turn, but it's also a 6-cost card, which just in itself is sort of a big payoff. Dragon Lord, just an on-reveal. Pretty easy to accomplish. Pretty easy to accomplish multiple times even. Dragon Lord cheating out. Well, I don't know if it works if it cheats out an Absorbing Man specifically, but it would work if you played it into a Wong, or if it cheats out a Grandmaster. That's your miss. And then Dragon Lord just moves over and cheats out some more cards. And then, of course, Odin, recently buffed into a nice 6/9, is like a big card that you can hit and will just allow you to dump an additional card from your hand. So Dragon Lord does feel fairly reasonable in terms of being able to breathe some more life into a ramp archetype. I do think like you could almost get away with some new version of like, instead of Hela, you're playing Dragon Lord. Now maybe Dragon Lord is a Hela card. Maybe you play it all in there because Hela also appreciates Odin, and Dragon Lord also kind of appreciates Blade, being able to discard certain cards so that way you are Dragon Lording your bigger ones. Seems cool. It is going to get stopped by Stardust, which is fine. That's something you got to deal with, but it seems like a pretty reasonable ramp card. Everything has some potential tech, and yeah, it can help you get out some of your big cards. Again, not necessarily going to be the best with the Season Pass card specifically, but could even get out Zombie Galacti. Ooh, okay. Yeah, this seems good. And we will see what Dragon Lord is able to do. Now we are going to start to take a look at the cards from the February 2026 season. None of these have any artwork associated on SnapFan or in the data mines right now, so we're going to be working with the screen that looks like this for the rest of the video. But first up, we have the February Season Pass card, or what I believe to be the February Season Pass card, Star-Lord, Master of the Sun. Star-Lord is a 4/5 with on reveal, next turn, you get +1 energy for each turn you've ended with unspent energy. And similarly to Shou-Lao, I think this is going to fall into the category of tracking things behind the scenes. Even when Star-Lord is not in your hand, it is going to be able to give you that extra energy for each turn that you don't spend energy. I think that the most straightforward way to play this card is on, well, I will say, having unspent energy does kind of lend itself to a high evolutionary strategy, which are decks that typically play limbo, so that way there's an extra turn to facilitate all of your triggers, and because of that, you might wind up playing this card on turn 6 even, and then on turn 7 getting 6 bonus energy for a total of 13. It's possible. Another thing that you can do with this card, though, is just play it by itself on turn 5, and then on turn 6, you're potentially looking at 5 bonus energy, and that gives you a total of 11 to play a bunch of tech cards and whatever. And this kind of makes it a little bit of a new take on Serra. There are some other synergies you could play with this. You could play this with, you could play it on turn 4, and then, well, okay, so this one's kind of tricky. I don't know exactly how you would squeeze all of this in. Maybe it's like a limbo thing actually as well. But like playing this alongside Warlock, I think would be really cute. That's the activate card that gives a bunch of discounts and bonuses, or maybe just discounts. It's got to be discounts and bonuses to cards in your hand based off your unspent energy for that turn. So I'm thinking like turn 5, you play on a 6-turn game. Turn 5, you play Star-Lord. Turn 6, you do nothing except activate Warlock. So you have 11 energy, which contributes to 11 discounts and bonuses for cards in your hand. And then on turn 7, you just get to do something absolutely ridiculous with a large Sunspot and a free She-Hulk and an Infinite. I believe Infinite works if you activate cards, right? Oh, I don't actually know. I was going to look it up, but I don't actually care either, because I think that this is still a little bit cute in terms of trying to pull off a strategy like that, but I do think it's reasonable to just play this card on turn 5 after playing like under energy cost cards every turn, whatever, well, under rate, like having unspent energy every turn. That's the easiest way to say it. You play like a Red Guardian, you play a Mysterio. On turn 3, you play, I'm sorry, not a Red Guardian. Well, sure, Red Guardian or Gladiator on turn 4. Then you play this on turn 5, and it's basically like all you do the whole game. Maybe you play a turn 1 Sunspot as well for a little bit more power, though a deck like this is often trying to toss priority, so that way it can play some tech cards on the final turn. And with 11 energy, that's enough to play Shang-Chi and Shadow King, and another 4 coster, which I'm not sure what that would be at this point in the game. You can't play Enchantress alongside all of those things. Maybe it's Rogue, and maybe you soak 1 more point up into Sunspot or something. Not totally sure, but I do think that this is likely to be reasonable. I think it's worse than Spider-Punk that we currently have. I think that it's worse than Shou-Lao. There are a lot of other things, though, that you can do with a bunch of extra energy. You could just, like, set up a combo on the early turns and then play it all out on the final turn in a way that your opponent won't really be able to expect. I'm thinking something like, turn 2 Agony, turn 3 Penny Parker, turn 4, I guess you could play Symbiote Spider-Man still on that turn, and then that would only give you 4 extra energy then on the final turn. So you wouldn't quite, maybe play a Ravonna in there as well at some point, and then with a bunch of extra energy on the final turn, you play a Man Spider merging with this, and you play an Arnim Zola. And the fact that you were just throwing all of this down on the final turn makes it a little bit more tricky. It's Man Spider without priority. Now this would open you up to a Cosmo line, but I do think that there is some interesting implications, and similar thing with 11 energy. You could just play, you could play this into Wong. Oh, okay. Well, if Wong is already something that you want to play in a strategy like that, it's 1 less energy because you'll spend turn 4 all of your energy on Wong, and then turn 5 you'll play this into Wong, but you'll generate 4 energy twice for 14 energy on the final turn. And okay, what are some things you could do for 14 energy then? You could potentially still play your Black Panther plus your Arnim Zola into that wonged location. It's there's a chance it could miss then, right? But seems fine. One thing to note here is that this will not be a combo with Sunspot in the way that would be really awesome, because it gives you the energy your next turn, which means if you are able to activate this card a bunch on the final turn of the game, with the idea that, so the reason that I bring that up, you've possibly seen it on my channel. One of my favorite decks is when Project Pegasus is the hot location. You just Legion and Snowguard bear form Project Pegasus a bunch of times, which gives you a super big Sunspot. And even if you do all of that on the final turn of the game, you get the energy, and then Sunspot immediately soaks it all up as unspent energy, which is really, really powerful. This will not be able to do that. So you couldn't just make a deck that is hoping to trigger this a bunch of times on the final turn of the game just to pump up a few Sunspots. That won't work, but there are some other combos that you can come up with when you have over 10 energy, right? So yeah, those could definitely be an interesting way to kind of battle for high power while tossing priority to play around Shang-Chi and Shadow King. Now I'm going to take a look at, I think again, 2 cards that are both Series 5, and we'll have to guess which of these 2 is the super premium season pass card. I think it's going to be Moondragon, because this is Star-Lord, Master of the Sun. I think it would complement well with Moondragon. It is weird that we are getting a dragon the month after the Shang-Chi month, but maybe Moondragon is just a Guardians card or Star-Lord relevant card, and I'm not super familiar with all of the lore. I will say, and I brought this up earlier, this is a Moon card that has nothing to do with even cost cards. I mean, it kind of does, but I mean, it cares about how much energy you spend. It doesn't have anything to do with even cost cards, so they broke from the precedent that they just set, unfortunately. But Moondragon, I don't really remember any of these cards at the end of the February season here, probably because there's no artwork with them. This is a 2/2 that says, end of turn, if you played 1 card this turn and spent all of your energy plus 2 power. Okay, I do remember it. I think that this card is ultimately a miss, but it's somewhat exciting because this is a card that has the same trigger condition as Doom 2099, which is also end of turn if you played 1 card this turn. It also has the requirement that you need to spend all of your energy though, and that probably just makes it a little bit tougher. It is, if you play it on turn 2, a 2/4. And then if you play 1 card every turn for the rest of the game and spend all of your energy, you can pump it up another 4 times. We're going to say turn 7 seems pretty difficult to do unless you specifically play Magic on 3 and then Fing Fang Foom on 7 or something. But for the most part, this is going to be a, if you hit all of your things, 5 triggers into it, a 2/12. 2/12 seems pretty good. However, the other big payoff, as I have noted, and I actually knew about this card before I even did my initial review because I saw people getting excited about this online as additional Doom 2099 support, but I don't think it is going to be quite that easy. The best cards with Doom 2099 are Zabu, but also Psylocke and Surge, because those cards allow you to play Doom 2099 on turn 3, which this does not. And if you're not playing this on turn 2, then you've already lost 2 points of power on it, and it is probably worse than a 4 or 5 cost card that you could play on turn 4 or 5. Like playing this on turn 5 and then pumping it up once on turn 6. is probably not the way that you want to go. Then you're playing a 2/4 that is only good in like your bad draw. Like that's the best case scenario for it, because realistically, I mean, the best case scenario would be turn 1 Zabu, turn 2 this, turn 3 Doom 2099. But the reason that I also bring up Zabu and Surge is because those are cards that you want to play in a Doom 2099 deck. It often means that those decks want to play a bunch of 4-cost cards, which then potentially have a discount when you wind up playing them on turn 4, so then you're not spending all of your energy. All of that is to say, I think that this card is just a miss. It is interesting to have another card with the exact same or a very similar trigger to Doom 2099. It would then facilitate playing something like Invisible Woman First Steps, because you could repeat both of the abilities end of turn. I don't think that that is where you want to take Doom 2099, and I don't think that a 2/12 even is something that that deck really wants, because it really wants to be playing Psylocke or Surge on turn 2, so that way you can get out the turn 3 Doom. So moving along here, we have Magus, which is probably a card releasing to snap packs at the start of the February season. Interestingly, in these data mines, we don't have any Series 4 cards. So I don't know what that means for the February season. Maybe we'll just get a season without Series 4 cards. They've done that before. Maybe they will do that again. A little break for a shorter month, or maybe these are just data mines, so all of the cards are not yet here. Magus is a 3/5 card with Activate. Ooh, this one's cool. Copy the text of a character in your deck with cost equal to your unspent energy. And I do believe that this is specifically talking about your unspent energy on the turn that you are activating Magus. And that's pretty cool. This is basically like a tutor effect, and it basically reminds me of like a Green Sun Zenith or something from Magic the Gathering, where you are picking how much exactly you want to channel into this. If you have a 1-cost card in your hand, then you could play the 1-cost card, and instead of activating Magus for 6 or 5 or 4, you could activate it for 1 number less, and similar with a 2-cost card. So this is very controllable, and it is also very controllable in that you get to choose which cards are in your deck in Marvel Snap. So you could create a scenario where on turn 5, you are always activating this if you haven't drawn Serra, and then this just turns into Serra. That's totally reasonable. You could also use this and activate and turn it into like an Iron Man, and then it's an Iron Man with 5 power. Those all seem somewhat reasonable. It could be an additional copy of Hela in a weird Hela deck, and we have seen some weird Hela decks that play like Agatha as the only 6, and then play Death and Scar as an 8 and a 7, so that way there's a variety of different things that Hela can bring back, and in those decks you don't play any other 6-cost cards, so this could potentially always hit Hela if Hela is still in your deck, which is a lot of consistency for decks that are looking for consistency. I think that the best possible home for this card, and feel free to make your own conclusions. By the way, I'm really curious on all of your thoughts on all of these cards. If there's anything that I missed that you think would be cool, bring it up in the comments, and I will mention it when I do these like season review propers, when these cards are actually set to release. You'll notice I'm not reviewing in this video the cards for the December season. It's just around the corner anyways, so I figure we'll wait and see what is actually coming, but feel free to let me know what you are excited for from December. And anytime you comment on any of my videos, include the word snap in your comments, and you'll be entered in to win a season pass for either this season or next season. Towards the end of the season, I start giving away season passes for the following season, and you have to include the word snap since I upload content that is also not Marvel Snap related. This way, people that are entering into the giveaway are people that are specifically interested in the season pass, and you can comment once on every single one of my Marvel Snap videos, and every time that you comment is another entry to win. I give out season passes and PAX bundles every single week. Okay, I've given you some time to think about what you think the best use for Magus might be. I actually do like that Hela idea. I just came up with that one. But I think that it's Mr. Negative. Mr. Negative, I think, is the best one because you can activate this on turn 4 and just always hit your Mr. Negative. And then it is basically a second copy of Mr. Negative. Those decks typically only play Mr. Negative as their 4-cost card of choice. And if you do happen to Mr. Negative and play a bunch of cards on the final turn that are flipped with Mr. Negative, so you're playing them for free, you could use Magus to grab like a gore that's stuck in your deck or something. And I think that's reasonable. This could also be, now typically the Mr. Negative decks will play, I don't think it'll work with Jane, because you wind up flipping Jane with Mr. Negative and then it costs 6. So I don't think that this will work specifically with Jane, though it could if you limbo. So if you go like turn 3 magic, turn 4 negative, turn 5 Magus, turn 6 skip, activate, then you will become a copy of Jane, drawing all the 0-cost cards from your deck, and that could be reasonable. I think that this will add more consistency to the deck than Esme currently does, but Esme does give you some additional like face down information and potential to high roll even further, which is an exciting part of that card. I think it'd be tough to fit both of those in, but I do think the added consistency for decks that are built around one specific card and only play that one card at that cost does seem good. Trying to think of some other ones you could potentially look out for, and honestly, something like an Arnim Zola is not crazy, but it's also not that great, just in terms of how you'd have to set that up. But I'm thinking like, okay, you didn't draw your Arnim Zola, this just becomes an Arnim Zola on the final turn. In order to facilitate that, you'd have to have this already in the same card, in the same location as the card that you do want to hit with Arnim Zola, which then gets awkward if you draw the Arnim Zola on the final turn. But what other cards, the reason I got to Arnim Zola is I'm trying to think of cards with 0 or low, at least, initial power, because most of their effect is in the ability that they have. So anything that typically has a low power that is something that you'd want to potentially tutor for is interesting. I am thinking like, okay, maybe Black Panther then is the only 5-cost card that gets played in the Black Panther decks, and then this just straight up becomes a new copy of Black Panther. It steals Black Panther's ability and gets up to 10 power, and that's totally reasonable. I think that would actually just be playable straight up. It would also remain a 3-cost card, which is very, very specifically particular. Okay, the curve is tough on this, but I'm just thinking you could then activate Magus in a Wong location, it would double up, and then you could actually activate a Symbiote Spider-Man attaching to Magus, because the problem typically with Symbiote Spider-Man is that we'll always attach to Wong instead of attaching to Black Panther if they are all in the same location, but that would instead attach to Magus. I don't know. I think that there's a lot of opportunities for this card, and the fact that it just gets to allow you to do what you're already trying to do, I think that this is going to find some homes in some decks that I enjoy playing in particular. Next, we have Drax, Avatar of Life, which I guess has no ability yet. Okay, so yeah, still a little bit of a work in progress, but we're potentially getting a new Drax. in the February season as well. We're also getting a Kraglin. Oh, we're getting a new Kraglin, which is a 3/2 with on reveal, banish the top card of your deck if its cost was 4 or more, +2 energy next turn, otherwise +4 power. So if you miss, this is a 3/6. That's not great. If you hit, +2 energy next turn is 6 on turn 4, allowing you to play Galactus, allowing you to play Destroyer fairly early in the game, allowing you to play any of those real big cards, and, either Galactus you could play. And that actually is pretty reasonable for a ramp card. In a ramp deck, this is probably going to hit a reasonable amount of the time, unless... Oh, okay. Well, here's the issue. If you're playing this, it kind of implies you didn't draw Luna Snow or Wave, because you'd play those first because they're more consistent and you can count on them. They are symmetrical, so there is a downside. Kraglin's not symmetrical, but you kind of like take advantage of the symmetry by just being able to more efficiently take advantage of the payoffs when you're playing those cards, right? And if you don't have Wave and you don't have Luna Snow, that probably means that those cards are in your deck and your expensive cards are instead in your hand, which could make it tough for Kraglin to actually give you that +2 bonus energy when you're really relying on it. Yeah, definitely something to be a little bit fearful of. I don't know about it now, actually. And our final card here for this video and for the February season for now is Jack Flag. Oh, I remember this one as well. Ongoing, your cards here with increased power get +2 power. I'm just looking at these cards in the order that they are presented on SnapFan. I wouldn't have ended on this one had I made a deliberate decision with what order I'm presenting these cards in, but I am not super excited about this card either. It's interesting, so I think that the main cards that you want to compare it to are other 3/3s with ongoing, Captain America and Speed. And I think that it's possibly worse than both of those. Your cards here with increased power is probably a trickier condition to satisfy than what Captain America is doing, which is just your cards with ongoing. So in an ongoing deck, it's losing out to a card that is already losing out to Speed, because most people just play Speed in this slot anyways, and Speed is like, sometimes Speed is just straight up a 3/9 because you use all of your energy every single turn. When it's not, it's like a 3/7, 3/8, and has additional synergies to get pumped up by Spectrum and such. Now, this card is potentially at the most a 3/9, right? Yeah, because all it's doing is pumping up 3 other cards and giving each of them +3. Okay, that seems absolutely terrible that the top end of this card is the exact same as the top end of Speed, and it asks for so much more for you. Now, it's easy to satisfy with like a Blue Marvel or a Spectrum, sure. I guess it's more of like a Zoo card then. It's just looking to be a 3/9 in Zoo. But it really doesn't seem... Yeah, Zoo is just like not a good deck. So is adding another 3/9 to that deck going to put it anywhere? I don't think so. I don't think that that's what Zoo is missing right now. So Jack Flag, I'm going to flag this one as not something that I am excited about. Which card am I excited about the most? Possibly Magus. Definitely from the February season, Magus. And what am I the most excited about from the January season? Let's go through them here real quick. Possibly, I do think it's probably just Shou-Lao, to be totally honest. But I think that Shang-Chi is interesting if the rings start in your hand and allow you to draw an additional card, and then they are good with They're good with Superior Spider-Man. Otherwise, like, just possibly Dragon Lord. It's not super splashy or anything, but it's probably the best card other than, yeah, the Season Pass card. I think that this thing looks busted. Let me know what you are the most excited for in the year 2026. But for today, that is going to be it for me. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.